I'm excited to announce an entirely new AR platform with a revolutionary new product. Introducing Apple Vision Pro.
And welcome to Tuesday Newsday, your #1 resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. This has been the biggest week of VR news, I think, in probably 7 years or so. Apple has finally announced and revealed its own vision of what AR and VR should look like, quite appropriately named the Apple Vision Pro. I've looked around and composited basically everything we know from the few dozen or so hands-on impressions and the keynote, and I think I've got a pretty good grasp of what this device is and what it's going to do. And I've got a very interesting, maybe hot take that I don't see many people talking about. But of course, this week held much more than just that. Meta officially revealed its own next headset. The Bigscreen Beyond is also getting a pretty big hardware boost before its launch. Just buckle up, we've got so much to unpack. All I can really say is the times, they are a-changin'. So let's just get right into the news. So let me just start off with what happened first this week. Meta held its gaming showcase, where they revealed a number of gaming-related titles coming to their platform within the next year. And while we did get some good stuff, general consensus for the showcase was kind of mixed. We got a handful of games coming to Quest, from I Expect You to Die 3, to Underdogs, to Ghostbusters, a 7th guest game, Stranger Things, and even stranger CGI-only trailer for an Attack on Titan VR game, Bulletstorm, and of course an Asgard's Wrath sequel that promises a 60-hour-long campaign, along with a title card reminding everyone that Assassin's Creed is still coming to VR eventually. And it's all pretty decent stuff, but notably the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas game that was announced a few years ago is still absent. There's nothing on it. And while none of these games look bad, some of them even look pretty awesome, I think the overwhelming majority of reactions were somewhere in the ballpark of meh, mostly due to heavy exclusivity for some of the games and graphical downgrades for a game like Asgard's Wrath, which used to be a PC VR game, while its sequel is exclusively coming to standalone on Quest 2 and 3 with no other options. But arguably the bigger announcement that was made during the showcase was the official reveal of the Quest 3, Meta's next VR headset, just days after all of its details were leaked by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. And turns out he had all of the information right. The Quest 3 will be launching later this year at Meta's Connect for $499, featuring the upgraded chipset, which compared to the Quest 2 will provide double the GPU power. The headset itself is 40% slimmer, has a slightly higher resolution, and most notably has full color pass-through with a depth sensor as well. And from people that have tried the Quest 3, they say that the pass-through is leaps and bounds ahead of anything that Meta has made before. One of the biggest changes, however, is actually the controllers though. Getting the awesome upgraded haptics that the Pro controller have, dubbed the True Touch, and on these new controllers are no tracking ring, instead using a mix of infrared lights and a new AI tracking model that Meta has developed for it. The company stating that tracking will be just as good as all the previous methods while cutting down on bulk. But of course, we'll have to see it firsthand. And all of this also came with some huge news for current Quest 2 and Pro users. Not only is the price returning to $299 for the Quest 2, but Meta has found a way to increase the clock speeds for both headsets in an update that'll come in the future. The Quest 2 and Pro are receiving a 26% CPU performance boost and a 19% GPU boost, while the Pro gets an 11% GPU boost. So both headsets are getting slightly better for free, which is awesome. And to be real, they're probably going to need it, because right now the Quest 2 and 3 are going to live together for a while, sold alongside each other for the foreseeable future, likely running the same software, operating systems, etc. Just one is going to be $300 while the newest iteration is $500. And my prediction is that this will probably be the case for a while, but exclusives will eventually come to the Quest 3, maybe even some of them announced at Connect in September, and the Quest 2 will eventually be phased out, probably in the same fashion the Quest 1 was. Still, the Quest 2 has a long life ahead of it, at least 2 years, I think, but we at least know exactly what's coming from Meta later this year. Whew. Okay, so that was the blast of the whole Meta showcase. Now we can talk about the big thing. It finally happened. After years of covering this thing, Apple has finally announced its headset. So first, I'm going to talk about the basic specifications so we can compare it apples to apples with everything we know, but then I want to get into what this thing really is and my thoughts on it, because most people are missing something here and it's not something that's obvious, especially the way Apple marketed this thing. So here goes. This is the Apple Vision Pro, one of the highest resolution headsets ever announced, with 23 million pixels across two displays that end up being somewhere around a 3840 by 3000 per eye resolution, which is much higher than just about anything else we've seen, pushed by two micro OLED displays through a pair of pancake style lenses. The headset has eye tracking, which automatically adjusts the interpupillary distance, so no need for a slider, face tracking, 6 microphones, 12 cameras, and 5 sensors consisting of LiDAR and depth sensors. In terms of compute power, the Vision Pro has an onboard Apple Silicon M2 for basic processing and a new Reality 1 or R1 chip that is likely being used to process all of the camera and sensory information. In terms of field of view, we don't have exact numbers, but from compiling everyone's reactions after trying it, we're looking at somewhere between a 95 to 100 degree field of view, which is basically industry standard. Now, that's the base comparison where you can slot in any existing headset and see where things stack up. And simply hardware-wise, the Vision Pro is industry-leading in every segment besides field of view perhaps. But that honestly doesn't do us any good when looking at this headset, because there are a few huge departures from conventional headset design that we gotta get into. Now, of course, the most obvious thing is the front display on the headset. Aside from being a very memeable feature, it allows for a reverse pass-through so people can see you in a headset while you're wearing the headset. But to me, right now, that's kind of a fluff feature, like it's definitely a conversation piece, and I think it's really cool, but it doesn't affect the user's experience outside of people's perception of you using it, which by the way is a much bigger deal to VR than it may seem, but we'll talk about that later. I'm not going to focus too heavily on it besides throwing in some jokes every now and then, because the biggest departure from standard design is one, this thing is only semi-wireless. It may be entirely standalone, but you either have to plug it into a power source or use an external battery bank allotting only 2 hours of battery life. And I don't see this as being a massive deal, but 2 hours barely makes it through a movie, which was 80% of the marketing. So the other thing is that this headset has no controllers at all. It is 100% eye tracking and hand tracking / gesture control. Now, there's two sides of this coin. On one side, universally from everyone that has tried this headset, even from VR-focused journalists, say that this is the best user interface experience they have ever experienced using a headset. Some even say it is quote-unquote magical. You look with your eyes where you want to interact and just pinch, or you look at, say, a search bar and just start speaking and it just takes your input. And that sounds awesome, but on the other hand, the past decade of VR development has been all controller based, which means nothing. Not a single thing out of the gate is compatible here out of the past decade of VR development. And this was a statement, and we'll loop back on that. There is yet another statement by Apple: the price. The Vision Pro, I'm sure you've seen it already, costs a whopping $3,500. For that, you could buy 3 Quest Pros and a Quest 3 or 10 Quest 2s, but that's kind of a silly comparison. You only got one head. Basically, the Vision Pro is very expensive, as we all expected. But now that the specifications are out of the way, I can talk about my takes on this. The Vision Pro is not a Quest 2, 3, or Pro competitor. It is not an Index or Bigscreen Beyond competitor. Instead, it's two things. One, of course, is it's an entirely new category of device. I mean, yes, it is a VR headset that has AR functionality, but Apple purposely didn't say virtual reality a single time during WWDC. It is something different. But here is the most important part and my biggest takeaway from the entire event. You want to know where this headset really competes, because believe it or not, $3,500 for a headset is actually an incredible value, actually a steal, relatively, of course, and for a specific kind of person, especially when you look at the only headset in the world that can possibly come close to competing specs and capability-wise with the Vision Pro, the headset that is pretty unanimously known as the best headset in the world. What I'm getting to is that the Vision Pro isn't even in the leagues of Quests and Indexes. Instead, it's a direct Varjo XR3 competitor at half the price. The XR3 being a mixed reality, primarily hand-tracked, eye-tracked, LiDAR-powered, super high-resolution headset. Sound familiar to the Reality Pro? Used across the industry, high and low, mostly because it's the only one in its category, yet it costs double the price of the Vision Pro at $7,000 plus a subscription. And this is where I think the Vision Pro stands. It is, right now, not a gaming headset, only being capable first party wise of playing flat screen mobile games and watching movies, although the memory volumetric capture feature is incredibly cool. It's a huge selling point, and it's one of the highest praised features actually, even though it is incredibly Black Mirror. And instead, Apple is focusing really hard on getting the absolute basics down. They're just getting flat in VR first. Then they let developers build spatial. And I really think we didn't see anything VR here because Apple is not a VR software developer. Maybe they will be in 6 years after a string of acquisitions, but right now they are an operating system and hardware company at heart. And this headset is providing the basis of something to be built on. And I want to end this segment with two big things to think on. One, think of the Vision Pro in the lens of the original iPhone. The iPhone launched without an app store. It was pretty basic and pretty controversial at the time. And it wasn't until third-party developers building apps that smartphones turned into what they are today. And two, this headset is a very Gen 1 or maybe even Gen 0 device. Apple didn't target Quest 2 users or Quest Pro users. They instead targeted the best headset in the world, and then they did it cheaper. This device is not intended for any sort of general audience in the same way that an XR3 isn't. If you want to play Beat Saber, I would never use an XR3. That's a ridiculous idea. But if I'm designing a car for Lamborghini or trying to edit a video in VR, the Quest 2 is borderline unusable. To me, Apple made a statement. They launched a ridiculously priced headset, not for the masses, but instead targeted towards a demographic that already knows they're going to develop for and use this headset. They knew they were going to use it before the announcement, and that's because it allows them to do things that previously were only possible on something like an XR3 plus a beefy computer. And this is Apple's flag. They said, this is the lowest quality they'll go, this is the benchmark, and this is how much it costs right now. And now it's up to developers to make things. It's up to engineers and creatives to use those things and to see where they can get use out of this. And it's up to Apple to eventually get slimmer, smaller, lighter, and more powerful, and most importantly, cheaper over time. And I think it's funny, when I said 2 years ago while reviewing the XR3 that eventually this technology that's so amazing would trickle down into something more affordable, I never predicted in 1,000 years that it would be Apple that is the biggest trickler of that. And to everyone that's watching the VR industry, the best part about this is that this headset doesn't change anything about the existing VR market. Congratulations, Meta. You are now the gaming king of virtual reality. Apple doesn't even want a part of it right now. And congrats to all future Quest 3 and Pro owners and Quest 4 owners, whatever. You have a device that will do 85, maybe 90% of what the Vision Pro does at a fraction of the price. And you should be proud of that. On top of that, I guarantee you the Quest 4 and whatever headsets come later are going to be better because this is a benchmark. Everyone will always be compared against this headset, which means we're gonna get a lot of pro-consumer moves. What I'm trying to say is that all MR, AR, VR headsets that are out now are just as functional as they've always been. But what this really means is the XR industry just got the biggest competition they've ever gotten, which is an industry pusher, and it's with a headset that doesn't even compete with them. This headset for this industry is a great thing. Just still, for the sake of the next decade of progress, I sincerely hope this is a success and not a flop story. This either sets mainstream adoption back by a decade or moves it forward by a decade. It's really all up to developers, both on Meta's side, PC VR side, and of course, the Apple side, just like it has always been. Okay, so we got one more thing. The Bigscreen Beyond, pretty much the headset I've been using as my daily driver, or more properly said, testing as my daily driver since it's not released yet, has a pretty big hardware update announcement. Now, this device is definitely different than anything else out there. It's the smallest headset ever made, custom made for your face, Steam VR tracked, micro OLED displays with 2.5K per eye, and it's releasing later this year. But one of the biggest drawbacks to this headset when I reviewed it sort of at the the time was the lower field of view because of its size. It previously was around Quest 2 FOV range, around 94 degrees or so. And well, just before launch, Bigscreen announced a 10 or so degree FOV bump with better lens clarity and less glare, coming to all future headsets that will be shipped. I've actually been testing this newest prototype and it's awesome. I got around 103 degree field of view in my own tests, and it's just made me fall in love with this headset even more. So love to see it. All right, well, that was a gigantic, massive week of VR news. Kind of crazy. I'm curious though, what are your takes on the showcase, the Vision Pro, all of it? Do you agree with me, or do you have an entirely different opinion? Look, I read all of the comments and I learned so much from all of you. So in addition to helping this video, I'm not gonna lie, comments, yes, of course, help the video, but the discussion is invaluable to me. Your comments allow me to really see what people are thinking and make better videos. And right now, it's just a wild time to be in the AR and VR industry, and I think things are looking pretty positive, but you know, that's just my opinion. There's lots of ways this Apple reveal could have gone bad, and I think we're in a pretty good timeline. We got a good outcome. Of course, I wanted to thank all of my Patreon supporters, especially my Omegas, and I got some special stuff for you guys. I just posted a bunch of Patreon exclusive videos and VR studio tours from when I was in Japan, so if you're interested in supporting the channel and watching those videos, go check it out. Otherwise, don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Thrill out.